this is the one that's going to be very difficult for me because this is the one that many people don't consider to be a popcorn movie. A lot of people consider this to be a hardcore sci-fi action film, and you get no debate from me about that. This is a hardcore sci-fi action movie that definitely deserves its place in history for pushing the bar like no other film has ever done. I'm talking about Robocop. Robocop is very, very strange. I have seen the made-for-television version first. I didn't see the action-packed film. One When I heard about this movie, no one would allow me to see this film. I tried to get in theaters. It was one of those movies that, no, you can't watch this film in theaters. Sorry, it's just not going to work. It's funny how they banned me from watching the first one, but they didn't have a problem for me watching the second one. I guess different theaters had different policies at the time, but then again, it was a whole different thing at the time. There were some theaters who were strict, and there were some theaters who was not. Perfect example, I wanted to see Crime and Misdemeanors. I actually liked the Woody Allen film. I knew who he was as a kid. I have seen a lot of his stuff on television. So hearing his name at the time, despite all the controversy surrounding him, was nothing new, and I wanted to see his film on the big screen. Keep note to self, I never seen a Woody Allen film on the big screen yet, which is something I gotta do, if anything, when he comes out with any film this year, because it is one of those things that I want to see and get that theater experience. But this is one of those movies, and deservedly so, that they kept me out of the film for. And again, I have saw the television version, but it wasn't until I got the VHS where I actually popped it in and realized what the hell was missing. And I was kind of even surprised it actually made the made-for-TV cut. I really did. I'm like, wow, this is way too violent for this film. And yet it was that violence, that sense of giving us this world, an apocalyptic world where, crime is just pretty much uncontrollable, where cops are fed up for being mistreated by a corporate entity controlling the police force, which is even, as crazy as that may sound, isn't too far from what's happening in Detroit now in many ways, in terms of what's been going on with them and what been happening in terms of them trying to revitalize a major parts of that city. But my goodness, this film was very violent, very out there, and to the point where I was even surprised that I thought this was not going to work. But as I saw this film, and as I got older seeing this film, I realized just how much of a genius, and why the sequels seem to completely miss the mark of why the first Robocop was always the best and always considered to be a classic. It really follows a rookie cop who goes by the name of Murphy. He had a female partner. They're fighting the crimes of the dangerous street of Detroit, basically dealing with a lot of situations. We witnessing just how much overmatched the cops are, to the point where they basically is considering striking, could make the situation worse. He's on the beat. He's doing his job. He was called into a very hostile scene where him and his partner pretty much got ambushed, but it was worse for him because he not only got ambushed, he got gunned down. And they didn't waste no time showing you just how brutal this scene was. Again, I saw the TV version. They didn't show the scene where he blew his hand off, and it was shocking. It was disturbing, and that was the whole point. It really set the tone of what the hell we was going to watch, and basically they killed him. He was clinically dead, and yet he wasn't. They managed to bring him back, but in the form of a cyborg, basically creating him from the ground up, making the ultimate police officer, the ultimate cop, a Robocop. Now this premise wasn't the first time this happened. They had other projects that went horribly wrong. One of the most violent scenes in this film, and there's a lot of them, is when the cop, when this machine basically pointed a machine gun arms at this guy, who immediately dropped the gun. Unfortunately, that it didn't register that he dropped the gun, and as a result, he ended up just shooting him to bits. It was just so brutal, and they leaned on that scene for a good portion, pretty much realizing that this project cannot work the way it is. They need to still have that human presence there, thus giving us RoboCop. This is a scene. This movie pretty much is an ultra-violent movie. It shows how RoboCop rises in the ranks, what he's doing, but you also start to see something happening. You also start to see that his memories and his subconsciousness is starting to return very slowly. He realized that something went terribly wrong. His memory is there. His emotion is there, to the point where he's starting to question himself and questioning what he is. And this is something that has been given. He first awes the cops because they never seen something like this. How he's shooting, his gun which is propped on his leg. He is definitely that living presence. And forget about the cops here. We as audience, whether you're watching on a big screen or even watching on television, is an awe, because this is the armor, the robo suit, or whatever you want to call it, is one of a kind. It's genuine. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people was not happy when they decided to change the classic suit to black. It never worked. I understand they went back to the traditional color that he once had, but they should never have changed it in the first place, because it was unique. It was one of a kind. It really gave you that this is not no ordinary cop, and this cop means business. The cold demeanor that he had brought into it means that he means business. You slowly start to see that humorless, expressionless, slow walk style of a cyborg. But as the film moves forward, you're starting to see that there is still a human inside of him trying to remember. And his partner pretty much made it even more ironic when he approached him and called him not by Robocop, but by his name. And that's when he started really remembering, going back to the house that he once lived, only to find out there is nobody there, and he realized his family has moved on. It is a very emotional, very frustrating, very sad scene, because he pretty much is the modern day Frankenstein, only he is supposed to be fighting justice, but what is the justice for him? He's no longer human. He's no longer able to function a way as us humans can, and it's really become more of a tragic story than anything else. This is what makes this movie so moving. Is okay, there's a human, supposedly human on his body, but he's not really as human as you and me thought of. And this is something they hit close to home. He eats off of baby food. He can't eat normal foods. I'm still kind of figuring what kind of process that is that goes into it. When he is turned on the very people who created him, it is heartbroken. It is very devious. The perfect example is that we found out that there was actually a person behind this whole entire thing that's going on. The company is actually working alongside with the criminals that is running amok in Detroit, which made the hit on the very man who okayed this project, and that's largely because the person, which by the way, the same main villain, is also ironically, the captain in both Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2. And he plays the villain here. He actually played a lot of villainous roles when you think about it in the 80s, early 90s. One being, of course, another popcorn film, which we talk about later, and that's Total Recall. But here, it's very obvious he's not very happy. And he took out the guy who basically made him look like a fool, because he had this machine that was supposed to be revolutionary, and it just didn't work out. So you end up taking him out. As for Robocop, he just went all out. He wanted this guy who did this, and he almost killed him in the very beginning, throwing him all over the place, beating him up until he actually gave a name. And then when he actually was basically strangling him, he told him he was supposed to be a cop, and he said, "Yeah, I am." And he basically threw him in the precinct, all messed up, all bloodied up. And he said, and he basically told the captain, book him, walked out, and said on what charge. He looked at him and said he's a cop killer. After that, you just didn't want to say anything else. He said, you know what, we'll deal with this later. Right now, he doesn't seem to be in the right state. But that's where he made his also first mistake, because he did give the name of who was responsible. And unfortunately, that was the paying people who made him. And they had a fail-safe system where he cannot go after those authorities, basically almost shutting him down. You can see him fighting with the system, and that's where this machine started taking over, and that's when the cops really going after him. It wasn't for his partner. He probably will be no more Robocop. Robocop is damaged, but not to the point where he's not functionable. We now see in pretty much next to the ending scene, which is to me the true ending of this scene, where he actually can finally make that last confront. And at this point, he's not thinking about being a cop anymore. He wants to get this guy. He wants to destroy this guy. And you start seeing some very brutal fight scenes. This is a brutal movie. Again, this is the one time I actually have to thank the theaters for not letting me see this at the age that I actually wanted to see this. But again, this is a very brutal film. This is a film that under the old system would have gained an X-rated rating. This is, and for those who don't know, the X-rated system, rated X, was not always generally mean porn. It means films that is not suitable for anyone under the age of 17. If you're not 17 and above, you wasn't going to see this film, no matter how much you beg. That's what the rated X is. This is for extremely mature adults. No more, no less. And this film pushed that. This is a heavy R for sure. This is an R, honestly, they don't make anymore. This film pushed that bar to a high-end degree. And trust me, that third scene pretty much was ice on the cake when you see one of the bad guys, gets pretty much hit with his van to acid, and you see it just eating him up. That was just like, oh my God, I don't care how much you want to root against the bad guys. That is not a peaceful death, and they ain't making it be known. I mean, these were just brutal deaths, and they showed it in such a way that it's like, it is cringeworthy, especially when he got hit by the car. There was nothing left. He just exploded. He was exploded to all pieces because of the acid melting on him. He was basically gone already. This body just didn't know it yet until it just basically blew him to pieces, with him finally getting revenge on the person who actually did the killing blow towards him. He finally got the guy who basically was in this conspiracy because he recorded what he said, and basically he was fired, and that's all he needed to have, basically shooting him down and probably giving us one of the worst CGI effect in the entire film. And it actually happened in the ending of that film, but this is how it ended, and it just pretty much ended with him walking away, and one of the CEOs from the company, whose name really escapes me right now. It's probably not even important at this point. You may disagree, that's fine. Basically asking, what is your name, officer? And he said, Murphy. Not Robocop, but Murphy. And the film ended just like that. It ended perfectly. It had a beginning, middle, and end. This is how exactly what it should have been. Too bad the sequels didn't do this film any justice. But that's another story for a time. I love this movie. Again, if you guys argue with me about this is not a popcorn film, I would not disagree with you. I like this film because it not only pushed the bar of how much violence you can go, it had a strong story. It had a purpose of why Robocop exists in this world. You see the reason why Robocop exists in this world. It's not just something that is just thrown out there and told to us, but we never see it. You see it, you feel it, and you understand why Robocop exists. He exists because this world exists, and you need this type of hero to meet the crisis that these officers face. Perfect prime example. The cops went on strike, and the criminals had a ball. It is something that is very, 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 very scary, and this is pretty much why they passed a bill saying that police officers cannot strike, because if it do, it'd be absolute chaos. and it shows that in a more science fiction apocalyptic style setting. I also want to make this very clear because I mentioned something here. This is one of the last true apocalyptic style films we have seen in this time frame, and it wasn't until probably Mad Max Fury Road that we seen an apocalyptic style film made, and made with such critical and moviegoers positive reception. This was praised by both critics and moviegoers alike, as being something original, as being something that's daring, but also having the guts to actually tell a story while at the same time being brutal at it, in a way that many people will go back and watch it again despite the brutality of this film. This is a unique movie. It is a one and done film in my opinion, because if you ask me about any other of the films, it never matched what this film is. This film really did set the bar and push that envelope of how far you can push that R rating, to the extent. It's a very strong, heavy R, probably the strongest in all the R-rated films to date. I think only Deadpool was managed to pull a lot of stuff that they have done, and a lot of people liked what Deadpool did. A lot of people didn't like it, but it did push that R feeling. You really felt you was watching a film that was meant for older adults instead of the usual 17 rating that they already have. And I'm kind of surprised because, again, if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, the Movie Picture Association, those who was doing the rating at the time, were very strict on how far you can go with the R-rated films, and they made it be known to the studios because a lot of films had to re-edit their film to meet the rated R standard, because a lot of the studios didn't want that X-rated system on their films, and for good reason. One, it was hijacked by the porn industry, to the point where the porn industry just made their own little rating system with the X-rated system. Yeah, you have X, double X, triple X. That's pretty much one more hardcore than another. So theaters pretty much made it clear they was not going to show any X-rated films, even though the film didn't have the sexually suggestive themes or the hardcore pornography that the porn industry have actually adapted for that system. But because of the motion picture's refusal to actually put another system in its place, and it was a long time before they started implementing the NC-17, many of the movies were forced to re-edit, recut. Prime example, some of the Friday 13th, even Nightmare on Elm Street almost fell victim to the X-rated brand. And it was only then after when they made some serious cuts to their film that actually got dropped to the R-rated film. As a result, a lot of films that would have probably been better if it wasn't heavily edited was edited down, and it really much ruined some of the quality of some of the films that it probably would not have been ruined if they kept the X-rated brand. Robocop, I honestly, if they did any editing, it must have been very little, because the stuff they kept in, I was just shocked. Even to this day, I was stunned of how much they really got away with keeping the R-rated brand on this. I'm like, wow, you're telling me this made the R cut in a year where it was actually warning horror films and slasher films? This actually was enough to get an R-rated rating? I was stunned. I mean, even some films like Midnight Cowboy, the only X-rated film that won an Academy Award for Best Picture, that had the X-rated brand, was actually re-rated as rated R, which is kind of the shocking thing in the entire thing, that they actually went back and re-rated at the rated R, even though I don't think that the film should have been re-rated. I thought that was something of an achievement, but unfortunately, again, the porn industry ruined that rating system, so there you go. This is a film that I honestly, if this was the edited version, could you imagine what the stuff that was left on the cutting room floor? Oh my God. This is something that I really scratch my head. And even to this day, if you look at that film, you cannot tell me that you look at that film, this film today would not be edited. There's no way in the world this film would have got out the way it was if it wasn't edited. This film would have been an NC-17 for sure. There was just no way this film would have been released right now in the year 2017 as a rated R film. It's just, that's how graphic the violence are. It's a whole different world. Keep in mind, a smoking scene could actually give you a rated R film rating now. So you can imagine what this film would have gotten. Which is my only feedback with this movie is that, and it really isn't the movie, but the people behind it, they still market this for kids. Keep in mind, I wanted to see this film because they had toys and video games marketed to children. Tell me somebody didn't drop the ball on this. It is also one of the reasons why the last two films, particularly 3, and the remake, have gotten PG-13. That's a marketing ploy. This was no marketing ploy. They should never existed. This was a hard graphic made for adults, made for mature viewers, yet they still were able to make toys out of it. Makes no sense to me. But again, it was a different way from time. If I got any feedback from this film, and I do have a few feedback, is a few things. One, I hated those freaking commercials. I can't stand it. They kept it throughout the whole entire trilogy. They kept it on the TV series. It was just annoying. It drew me off the film for a while. The ending CGI is like, wow, you're lucky. There was all the stuff there that makes up for it. But man, that was painful. The film did tend to slow down when nothing's happening, especially when it was about to go to the third act. There was a little bit of slowness that was there. Other than that, I thought the story was cleverly written. I thought how they connect everything to what was going on between the characters was well written. I thought the action fit the environment, and I want to make this very clear because this is something that I agree with a lot of people who saw the remake. And I'm not going to go too much into that. I'll talk about it when I get there. But the environment was very, very important. If Robocop just came in there and just started shooting people and the environment didn't fit the need, it would look like confusing. It would look like more if he is a killer and you don't really understand what justified this character to do what he's doing. In this film, you saw from the very beginning what the police has been going up against, what Robocop is going up against, the political nightmare that he has to go up against, and the backlash leading to this nightmare that he's going up against. You see it in this movie. You see it within the character. You see what they're going through. This is an emotional train ride for everyone involved, and every character involved, and you see that. That's very, very important. It's very important to feel that grit. Without that, this film would not have worked. And also the same reason why the other films did not work, because you never felt that grit. Here, you felt it. You know it was at stake here, and you see the brutality that that this is going through. Again, this is a visually shocking film. But it needed to be shocking for this film to work, and for that reason I gave this film 3.5 out of 4. It is definitely debatable whether you consider this a popcorn film. I'm not going to argue with that. What I'm arguing with is that, is it a film that is definitely action worthy and worth the timeless classic film that a lot of moviegoers and a lot of critics, because well, you know, a lot of critics did praise this film at the time. I don't know what the feeling is now, but it is one of those films that if you look back, this is the only film that many of the fans talk about. Nobody talks about 2. Nobody dares talk about 3. I don't even know if anybody even mentioned about the sci-fi made-for-TV movies. I don't dare talk about the TV show. And even though a lot of people have mixed feelings on the remake, the one thing everybody always said is the grit, the feeling of that urgency that made the Robocop film work was not there. Here is here. You see it. You felt it. You know why what's at stake here, and that's what makes this film so far workable. It is also why I felt when I heard the announcement that Robocop 2 was being made, I didn't think it was going to work. I said, there's no way you can implicate what this film is. If anything else, it will probably have the blood and gore, but it will not have the depth, the grit, and the feeling that this film has have gotten. And I think that's something that has been proven over time with the sequels that has been made. But that's another story for another day. But for now, does it deserve its title? Oh yes, it is definitely a classic because again, not only was it one of the best sci-fi action films of that time, but it also pushed the boundaries that no other film has done since. You will never see a film be made this way this made and get an R-rated film. Not in today's environment. It's unfortunate because I think that there should be films that can push that boundary of R and give it that kind of heavy R that some of these films need without having to worry about putting this up in a stigma of being restricted to limited theaters. However, there is some good news. NC-17 is getting more credibility. It's slow, but it's definitely getting that because there are movies that are being recognized that are mature and are setting the boundaries that they're supposed to set, and they're having heavy star qualities to push that NC-17 forward. So who knows? Who knows? But for me, this is a classic that stands by itself. This is a classic that pushed that boundaries. And this is a classic that not only done it with shockingly violent images and just downright being just violent, but it did it while at the same time giving us a real solid, well-told story that kept us interested and invested throughout the time. It is definitely one of those classics. You may disagree. I'd like to hear your opinion on it. I'd like to hear what you have to say about this review. You may feel that I will drop the ball on a lot of things. That's cool. Let me know in your comment section below. But until next time, it's J77 saying take care, be safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.